Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Naomi Whitfield's life was a careful performance of perfection. Every morning, sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of her penthouse overlooking the Thames, glinting off marble floors, priceless art, and furniture imported from Milan. Staff moved quietly, almost reverently, as if afraid to disturb the silence that wrapped the house like mourning cloth. Since Daniel Whitfield's death 2 years earlier, the mansion had ceased to feel like a home. It was a monument, an echo chamber filled with memories Naomi could neither escape nor fully embrace. Daniel had been charismatic, brilliant, admired by the world. To Naomi, he had been attentive, loving, and seemingly devoted, or so she had believed. Each day, she dressed in tailored designer outfits, attended board meetings, signed documents worth millions, and returned to emptiness, so loud it rang in her ears at night. She told herself she had everything: wealth, power, respect. Yet some invisible absence gnawed at her soul. She had wanted children, had prayed for them, but fate had remained cruelly silent. Now, at 38, she lived surrounded by luxury that only magnified her loneliness. That afternoon, Naomi's driver slowed the Rolls-Royce near a busy London junction when traffic thickened unexpectedly. Naomi glanced out of the tinted window, her attention caught by movement on the pavement. A woman stood there, thin to the point of frailty, her clothes hanging loosely from her frame. In her arms were 2 babies wrapped in warm blankets. The woman's eyes were hollow yet alert, scanning faces for mercy. Naomi felt an unfamiliar tightening in her chest. She was accustomed to seeing poverty from a distance, usually softened by charity galas and foundation reports. This was different. The woman's desperation was raw, unfiltered. As the babies shifted, one lifted his face. Naomi's breath caught. Hazel eyes, rare, striking, unmistakable. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single detail. Daniel had possessed the same eyes, a shade so uncommon doctors had once commented on it. Naomi leaned forward, heart pounding, disbelief warring with instinct. Logic screamed coincidence. Her intuition whispered something far more dangerous. Before she could reconsider, Naomi instructed the driver to stop. Stepping out, she felt the sharp autumn air against her skin. The beggar woman stiffened, fear flashing across her face as Naomi approached. Up close, the baby's resemblance was undeniable. Their eyes, their noses, even the shape of their tiny mouths stirred memories Naomi had buried with her husband. Introducing herself calmly, Naomi asked the woman's name. "Rebecca," she replied, voice trembling. Naomi offered help: food, shelter, medical care. Rebecca hesitated, suspicion clouding her exhaustion, but hunger and desperation won. Naomi extended her hand, not as a billionaire, but as a woman compelled by something she could not yet name. That single gesture would shatter the carefully preserved illusion of her life. The mansion buzzed with unfamiliar energy that evening. Doctors arrived, nurses followed, and Rebecca sat rigidly on the edge of a sofa that cost more than everything she had ever owned. The twins, James and Joseph, were examined, fed, bathed, and finally slept peacefully for the first time in days. Naomi watched from a distance, emotions churning violently inside her, compassion tangled with suspicion, pity with dread. Rebecca's story spilled out in fragments: abandonment, homelessness, a man who once promised love but vanished. Naomi listened, her face composed, but her mind raced. Every detail Rebecca revealed seemed deliberately vague, yet painfully familiar. Naomi ordered a discreet DNA test under the guise of medical necessity. The decision felt cold, almost cruel, but she needed the truth. The waiting became torture. Each time Naomi looked at the twins, she saw Daniel, smiling, confident, alive. When the results arrived, Naomi locked herself in her study. The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes. The twins were Daniel's sons. Proof stared back at her, undeniable and merciless. Her knees buckled as realization crashed over her. Her marriage, her love, had been built on a lie. Memories replayed with new clarity. Business trips that lasted too long, unexplained absences, sudden phone calls taken in private. The betrayal burned deeper than grief ever had. Yet, when Naomi emerged hours later, she did not confront Rebecca. Instead, she looked at the sleeping children and made a decision that surprised even herself. Whatever Daniel had done, these innocent lives did not deserve punishment. Naomi resolved to protect them, even if it meant burying her own pain. Days passed, and Naomi extended her generosity. Rebecca was given a room, new clothes, therapy sessions, and a stipend. To the outside world, Naomi appeared saintly, a widow rescuing a destitute mother. Inside, she was fractured. At night, she sat alone with the truth, torn between rage and empathy. Rebecca, sensing Naomi's kindness, relaxed. But beneath her gratitude simmered something darker. She had not expected this level of luxury, nor had she anticipated Naomi's strength. When Edward Whitfield and Oliver Whitfield learned of the twins, their reactions were immediate and venomous. They saw threats, not children. Edward, Daniel's brother, argued inheritance laws late into the night with lawyers. Oliver, charming and calculating, paid Rebecca a visit under the pretense of concern. Oliver's words were honey poison. He spoke of futures, wealth, legitimacy. He planted seeds of resentment in Rebecca's mind, twisting gratitude into entitlement. "Those children deserve everything," he whispered. "And you deserve more than scraps of charity." Rebecca listened, torn. Naomi had saved her life, yet Oliver's promises glittered temptingly. Slowly, manipulation took root. When Oliver suggested removing Naomi entirely, Rebecca recoiled at first. But desperation and greed blurred moral lines. Love, loyalty, gratitude all felt abstract compared to survival and power. The plan unfolded quietly, methodically. Rebecca began preparing Naomi's evening tea, adding small amount of poison designed to weaken, not kill. Yet, Naomi's health declined subtly at first. Fatigue, dizziness, unexplained nausea. Doctors were puzzled. Rebecca played the attentive caretaker, masking guilt with smiles. Edward and Oliver watched in the shadows, impatience growing. One evening, Naomi overheard a whispered conversation she was never meant to hear. The words froze her blood. Murder, inheritance, celebration. Terror sharpened her mind. Naomi retreated, her fear transforming into resolve. She contacted Dr. Amelia Grant and laid out a desperate plan to fake her death. It was the only way to survive and expose them all. When news of Naomi's sudden death broke, London society mourned extravagantly. Rebecca cried convincingly. Edward and Oliver celebrated privately. But weeks later, in a packed courtroom, justice arrived unannounced. Naomi walked in alive, composed, unstoppable. Gasps echoed. Evidence played. Confessions surfaced. Rebecca collapsed. Oliver raged. Edward aged years in seconds. Sentencing was swift and unforgiving. In the quiet aftermath, Naomi stood in the nursery watching James and Joseph sleep. Betrayal had nearly destroyed her. Yet these children, born of deception, had become her salvation. She adopted them officially, choosing love over bitterness. For the first time since Daniel's death, Naomi felt whole. The courtroom drama did not end with the slam of the judge's gavel. Outside, the press surged like a living tide, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions that cut through the air with ruthless curiosity. Naomi Whitfield moved through them with quiet dignity, her posture straight, her face calm despite the storm she had unleashed. The world now knew she was alive, that she had been betrayed not only by her late husband's blood relatives, but by the very woman she had rescued from the streets. Headlines painted her as both victim and mastermind, a billionaire widow who had outwitted death itself. Yet behind the controlled expression and measured steps, Naomi felt an exhaustion deeper than any illness the poison had caused. Survival had demanded strength, but healing would demand something far harder, emotional honesty. That night, alone in her mansion once again, she finally allowed herself to cry. Not for Daniel, not even for Rebecca, but for the version of herself who had believed love alone could protect her from deceit. Rebecca's trial followed swiftly, and with it came revelations that shocked even the most cynical observers. Evidence revealed how Oliver had groomed her fears and ambitions, exploiting her desperation and slowly transforming gratitude into greed. Rebecca's testimony was fragmented, her voice trembling as she spoke of hunger, homelessness, and the intoxicating pull of wealth dangled before her like salvation. The court listened, but sympathy did not erase culpability. Naomi attended every session, sitting quietly, refusing to avert her eyes. She needed to see it all, to confront the full truth rather than bury it under silence. When Rebecca was sentenced to life imprisonment alongside Oliver, the courtroom fell into a heavy hush. Rebecca's gaze met Naomi's one last time, filled with regret and something close to apology. Naomi did not nod or turn away. She simply held that gaze, acknowledging the tragedy without surrendering to it. Edward Whitfield's downfall was quieter, but no less devastating. Stripped of influence and assets, his carefully constructed empire collapsed under the weight of legal scrutiny. Years of manipulation and entitlement unraveled, leaving behind a bitter, diminished man who had gambled everything on greed and lost. Naomi watched from a distance as the Whitfield name, once synonymous with prestige, fractured irreparably, yet she felt no triumph. Revenge had never been her goal. What she wanted, what she still wanted, was peace. In the weeks that followed, she retreated from public life, delegating business matters and canceling social obligations. The mansion that once felt like a mausoleum slowly transformed into something warmer, livelier. Laughter, soft, uncertain at first, began to echo through its halls. James and Joseph became the heartbeat of Naomi's days. Their routines dictated her schedule. Morning feedings, doctor visits, afternoons spent watching and discover the world one curious gesture at a time. Caring for them grounded her in ways wealth never had. Each milestone felt miraculous, a reminder that life could still surprise her with joy. At night, Naomi sat beside their cribs, telling them stories of courage and kindness, of choosing love even when it hurt. She did not speak of Daniel. Not yet. That truth would come later, when they were old enough to understand complexity and forgiveness. For now, they only needed to know they were safe, cherished, and wanted. The adoption process was thorough and at times emotionally draining. Lawyers scrutinized every detail. Psychologists assessed Naomi's readiness, and social workers observed her interactions with the twins. Naomi welcomed it all. She had nothing to hide and everything to prove, not to the system, but to herself. When the final papers were signed, she felt a profound sense of rebirth. James and Joseph were officially her sons. The moment the judge confirmed it, Naomi's composure finally broke. Tears streamed freely as she pulled the boys close, overwhelmed by a love fierce enough to eclipse betrayal. The courtroom, once a place of near death and public humiliation, became the setting of her quiet triumph. As months passed, Naomi rebuilt not just her family but her purpose. She established a foundation focused on vulnerable mothers and children, channeling her resources into preventing others from falling into the desperation that had ensnared Rebecca. The work was personal, driven by empathy rather than obligation. Naomi visited shelters, listened to stories, and funded programs that offered education and health care. Each life she touched felt like a small act of redemption, not for Daniel's sins, but for her own survival. The press gradually shifted its narrative, portraying Naomi not as a tragic figure, but as a resilient one, a woman who had transformed pain into impact. There were nights when memories resurfaced, Daniel's laughter, his promises, the life she thought they shared. Naomi allowed herself to feel the grief without letting it consume her. Therapy helped, as did honesty with herself. She acknowledged that love could coexist with betrayal, that forgiving did not mean forgetting, and that moving forward did not erase the past. Slowly, the ache dulled. In its place grew gratitude for clarity, for strength, for the unexpected family now woven into her life. Years later, as James and Joseph ran laughing through gardens, Naomi watched from the terrace, sunlight warming her face. The mansion no longer felt empty. It pulsed with life, with purpose. She thought of the afternoon she had stepped out her car on a crowded street, guided by an instinct she could not explain. That single act of compassion had nearly cost her everything, and ultimately given her more than she had ever dreamed possible. Naomi smiled, her heart full. She had been betrayed, poisoned, and nearly erased. Yet she had emerged not hardened, but whole. And in choosing love over bitterness, She had finally found a family she had always longed for. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.